The promise of an Aryan world would never materialize. So why did they all come out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died? The Hitler been everywhere. The Hitler been everywhere. The Hitler been everywhere. The Hitler been everywhere. The world is riddled with maggots. The maggots are getting fat. They're making a tasty meal of all the bosses and bureaucrats. They're taking over the boardrooms and they're fat and full of pride. And they all came out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died. So if you meet with these historians, I'll tell you what to say. Tell them that the Nazis never really went away. They're out there burning houses down and peddling racist lies. And we'll never rest again until every Nazi dies.
Well met, folks. Hey, is this thing on? Is this thing on? Can y'all hear me? Hey, folks. Sorry for the late start. I met in the middle, had some technical difficulties. My computer stopped recognizing my earphones for some reason, and they kept disconnecting. So yeah, I'm just gonna sit here and chill out and fiddle around with things until the official start time, which is 7:05 p.m. And yeah, see, I just lost my earphones again. The computer disconnected them. Let me try to reconnect. This is ridiculous. So two technical difficulty things happening here that I am just cannot be bothered to figure out right now. The earphones thing is annoying. The other one is I can see my chat, but for some reason YouTube will not let me sign in to my own chat. So I'm just not going to type anything in chat. And I hope that y'all behave yourselves. Anywho, welcome to Ye Olde Stream, episode 0. I kind of bummed out. We had a rough day today. I don't know if y'all noticed. Big things going on in the world. I'm just gonna chill till people get here. You know what? Hey, the Maestro. Hello, Rebel Scum. Welcome. Y'all can't hear it, but these earphones keep giving me a signal that they're constantly disconnecting from my computer and reconnecting. So what I'm gonna do is just kill them entirely. And when I stream a video that I want to react to, I'll just use my Wi-Fi speaker and put it in front of my microphone. And hopefully, let's just test that out right now. This is really starting to annoy the shit out of me. This never happens. Like, whenever I stream with like Dane or and Morgan and so forth, my earbuds work fine. But for some reason now they choose to tell me to go screw myself. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to switch over to the save screen right now. And I am going to set up my remote speaker and see what happens. Okay, let's do a little test here. I was just listening before stream to that song. Hopefully y'all heard it. What I'm going to do is just replay the video I had running and see if my microphone will pick up the speaker that I have on my desk rather than my earphones. And y'all can let me know in chat if it sounds terrible or not. In fact, I'm not going to play the music. I will go back to the video I was watching, which is a Jesse Gender video.
Man, people really be thinking Lower Decks is out here like Red from that 70s show and that one episode of Star Trek Voyager where he's just erasing time.
Okay.
Hello, interwebs. I hope you are all doing well. And today I want to talk about a controversy. And I put heavy air quotes on the word controversy here because it's very much a manufactured controversy.
Let me know how that sounded in chat. If that sounded okay, that's what we'll do for the night. And then next time, I'll use a different streaming service. I don't know what the fuck is going on here. 5 minutes until the official start time. And cool, it sounds good. That's good. Good to know. And like I said, stuff happening in the country. Excellent. But was it good sound quality? Like, was it good enough to actually make this worthwhile? So, we appear to have solved the audio issue. The other issue that I can't seem to log into my chat through Streamlabs OBS, I'll worry about later, because I wasn't really planning on interacting with chat today anyway. I'm learning live streaming step by step, and the first step is to just do it, and then work out the technical glitches later on. We'll give a few more people time to show up here. So it's going to be a rough couple of years for the United States and probably for the world. Trump dropped a ton of executive orders today. And some of them are pretty wild. We're not going to go into it on stream. I don't want to trigger anybody. I want this to be like a chill escape from the bad news stream today. But just keep your eye on it. And go look up what Shadow President Elon Musk did. That was pretty funny. Good times, y'all. Good times. How's everybody doing? Let me know in chat how you're feeling. How are you reacting to the news, the inauguration, and so forth. Because I got to tell you, privilege protects me to some degree. I am cisgendered. I am white. I'm a dude. So a lot of the system is going to ignore me for a while. I have been very vocal about my political opinions online for many, many years, so it's not hard to figure out that I'm not really on board with all this. But before they get to me, I plan on doing things to put myself in front of marginalized people in whatever way that I can. Offline in the real world, in meat space, as we used to say, I'm involved in a couple of different grassroots organizations and mutual aid programs and so forth. Hello, Travis's Media Madness. Thanks for joining us. I'm not going to start the stream officially until 7:05. I just wanted to give people time to show up. And once again, to let y'all know, I'm not going to be able to type in my chat. I can see my chat, but I'm using Streamlabs OBS, and it won't let me sign into chat through that for some reason. So I'm just going to ignore that as much as possible today. Like I said, learning streaming one step at a time. The first step is to just do it and see how things work out. So that's where we are right now. Yeah, Maestro, I didn't really pay attention to this stuff today either until I got off work, which, by the way, explains my late start. I live in Los Angeles, and the wildfires are under control, but they are still affecting traffic, so I wasn't able to get home as early as I wanted to. Usually my commute is much shorter than it was today, but a lot of traffic is being rerouted and detoured. So it took me longer to get home than I wanted. But I ignored most of the news today until I got home. And like started looking at the news while I was eating dinner and stuff and was like, oh boy. Oh boy. Well, thanks, Travis. I love seeing you on the initiative chat. That's a very nice thing of you to say. So we're about 1 minute out. So we'll give a couple more minutes for people to show up, and then we will begin. I've got some videos lined up. I have partially pre-watched a couple of them, but a majority of them I haven't watched at all. And I don't think we'll be able to get through all of them. So I will probably ask you guys, you folks, I should say, to make it gender neutral, you folks in chat, which ones you want me to react to. So it is now 7:05, the official start time of Ye Olde Stream episode 0. So here we go. Welcome, travelers. Today, we're going to talk about the Chronicles of Narnia and the Netflix movie that's going to be coming up next year. More about that in a minute. If you are new here, or maybe if you're not new here, you may just know my channel from the fact that the algorithm recognized me because I was making Rings of Power content, which is something I sort of just stumbled into. I didn't set out with the goal of making content that defends the Rings of Power TV show. It was my intention when I started YouTube to make reaction content to pop culture things, like crazy uncle watches Harry Potter for the first time, that sort of thing. And I was enjoying that, but I wasn't really happy with my algorithmic performance. This is just a hobby to me. I'm happy where I am right now, but at the time I was a little bit disappointed with my performance, but I was just starting out, And the trailer for Rings of Power Season 1 dropped, and I reacted to it, and I thought it was really, really cool looking, because I'm a lifelong Tolkien fan. And because of that trailer, I started seeing videos by Nerdrotic and Geeks and Gamers and The Critical Drinker and so forth. So Rings of Power was my introduction to what I call the Pakled channels, the chuds, as some people like to call them, as my buddies at the initiative like to call them. You know the type. I don't have to explain who they are. At least not to any of you. Point being that that's how I got introduced to these guys. And by the time I was introduced to them, they had already built up their narratives about the Rings of Power, that it's woke and so forth, and had been circulating these talking points in their own community for about 2 years already, before anything about the show even went public. So they had a lot of built-in lore. And when I started making content defending the Rings of Power, excuse me, I had to suss out what some of their talking points actually were, because by that time they were just baked into the content and weren't stated explicitly. So now that Rings of Power Season 2 is done with, and we're going to be in the long hiatus before Season 3 comes out, and yes, there will be a Season 3. They've already started making casting news about it, or putting out casting calls for it, I should say. But there's going to be a hiatus. And I've been looking around for things to do with my channel in the meantime. And one of the things that caught my attention was the upcoming Chronicles of Narnia project for Netflix. Now, Netflix bought the adaptation rights to the entire series of Narnia books a couple of years ago, which is something no one has ever done. And then they just sat on that for a while until Greta Gerwig came along and went, "Hey, buddy, I love these books. Can I adapt some of them for you?" And a match made in heaven was born. So we learned about a month ago in December that shooting on Greta Gerwig's first Chronicles of Narnia movie begins in July of this year. and the movie itself is scheduled to be released in a limited theatrical release in November of 2026, around Thanksgiving, and it will then shift exclusively to the Netflix streaming platform in December of 2026. So that means we've got about 2 whole years for the Chuds to build up their anti-Narnia talking points. And all it's going to take is one black person in the cast, or one queer-coded actor in the cast, or anything like that. Now, we can predict some of their talking points, generally speaking, I think, but I've thought in the interim of waiting for new Rings of Power stuff to be going on, it would be interesting to observe and respond to the talking points around Narnia as they develop in real time. And I think that Narnia is probably going to be as big of a culture war battlefield as the Rings of Power was, because they are thematically very similar to each other in a lot of ways. Both IPs are ones that conservatives feel some sense of ownership over, right? Because both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were deeply religious men who wrote Christian symbolism into their stories, conservatives in the United States today kind of think that makes those properties theirs. It wasn't always this way, right? When I was a kid, in the long, long ago, when I was living my Stranger Things life, and by the way, it's all true. Stranger Things is all true. I was a kid in the 1980s, and a teenager in the late 80s, and shifting into college in the 90s and so forth. And I loved Narnia. I loved Lord of the Rings. But back then, it was not really coded as a conservative thing. If you were a kid who walked around with a Narnia book in middle school, you were pegged as like a nerd. You were like the weird D&D kid, right? And Lord of the Rings was basically a hippie thing. If you were caught reading Lord of the Rings, people assumed you were a hippie. And by the time I reached like college age, I started noticing a shift in the demographics of the fandom of both Lord of the Rings and Narnia. This is, of course, from a perspective of somebody in the United States South at the time. Uh-oh. Some fire sirens are going by. Hold on. Wildfires are raging. Anyway, the point I was building up to is that I started noticing that cultural and religious conservatives essentially started colonizing the fandoms of Narnia and Lord of the Rings at around the time that I was entering my first failed college career. And I thought it was really weird that these people were latching on to these fandoms. But we've now, 30 years later, we've had a couple of generations of conservative people growing up with these two IPs in particular being used as part of their culture, right? White American evangelicals get a lot of proselytization value towards young people with the Narnia books. And it's gone on for a couple of generations now, so that now that group of folks, the cultural and religious conservatives, think that these properties belong to them. They assume that a faithful adaptation of Narnia must necessarily be conservative. Here comes some more fire engines. Wow. Hold on, y'all. I don't know if y'all can hear that or not, but reminder, I live in Los Angeles and there are still some wildfires going on. Anyway, conservatives in the United States feel like they own Narnia, and they've been using Narnia to preach Christianity, particularly conservative Christianity, to their children for decades now. And as a result, a lot of the fans of this property assume that because they are conservatives who grew up loving Narnia, that Narnia therefore must be conservative. And any faithful adaptation of Narnia must reinforce conservative cultural and religious values. And if it doesn't do that, in their estimation, they're going to like freak out and think it's woke. So Greta Gerwig is a big problem for them. They're a little bit concerned about what's going to happen. Because, you know, she's a feminist. And that freaks them out a little bit, I think. So what I want to do on this stream is I've got some videos lined up, about 5 of them that I found over the last month, because when the news dropped that shooting on Narnia begins in July of this year, a couple of lower tier Chud channels put out some videos about that subject that I think might be starting to test the waters a little bit. They're putting out some feelers as to what arguments they're going to try to use to build their culture war narrative about Narnia. And one more contextual thing that I think links Rings of Power and Narnia as cultural battlefields is that just like Rings of Power developed while Trump was in office, Chronicles of Narnia is going to do the same thing. So we've got 2 conservative coded properties developing under a conservative president. So the Chuds are going to be circling like hawks. Anyway, I've got 5 videos lined up, and I do not think I will have time to get through all of them. So I'll ask chat who they want me to look at first. The 5 videos are by RK Outpost, John F. Trent, Clownfish TV, John Delarose, who I will refer to as John of the Rice going forward, and a live stream by Geeks and Gamers where this subject was one of the ones they talked about. And I think these are like lower tier, these are like C or B tier Chud channels. They're orbiters of the big guys, so they're going to be testing out some arguments. So who would you guys like to see me watch first? Ryan Cannell, Clownfish TV, John F. Trent, John of the Rice, or Geeks and Gamers? And just a reminder for the new folks, I want to scroll through my chat here and see who's new here. Rebel. Oh, hello, Dane. Dane's here. Nice to see you. Philip, good to see you. I've already said hello to all the rest of you fine folks. So a reminder that I'm having trouble interacting with signing into my chat through the Streamlabs app that I'm using. So I will not be able to type into chat at the moment. I can see it though. What did Dane ask here? Which one do you think Mercanti would watch? That's a good question. I think she would watch them all. So Travis, John F. Trent is the guy who, I think he founded Bounding Into Comics, which was the fake news website that a lot of the Chuds used. And he sold that off, and then he founded Fandom Pulse. But he also has his own channel, and he's like a super conservative Catholic type who, you know, he's basically the Catholic version of a Christian nationalist. But he's got his own channel that I think he's trying to like get off the ground. And the video I found by him has a couple thousand views. Oh, you're the other one, Forced Adversity Podcast. You're not Dane. You're the other one. Okay. Well, hello, other one. Welcome to my chat. Jay Bird, I'm here as well. John Trent used to write for Bounding Into Comics. He didn't just write for them. I think he owned Bounding Into Comics, but he's no longer there now. His new one is called That Park Place, yes, and I think he's also involved in Fandom Pulse. But he has his own channel, like I said. So again, the choices are Ryan Cannell, John F. Trent, John Delarose, Clownfish TV, or Geeks and Gamers. I'll just pick one if no one has a preference. Let's see. Well, in their version, so Forced Diversity Podcast has to say, and in their version of conservative Christianity, not the Christianity of Lewis's time. Right. That's something I was a talking point I was saving for maybe later. It might come up in some of the videos I want to look at today, but yes, the Christianity of C.S. Lewis, the author of the Narnia books, is very, very different from the Christianity of modern white evangelical Christian America. Were it not for the proselytization value they get out of his books, I think that they would have written him off as a heretic long ago. The quick talking points would be, number one, he's not a biblical literalist. He accepted evolution as true, and most of the rest of modern science at that time. He was something of a universalist, which means he did not believe in what we would call penal substitutionary atonement theory. He believed in purgatory. A universalist, by the way, is someone who thinks that salvation is available through other religions, not just Christianity. So Lewis was that. Lewis was a liturgical Christian, not an evangelical Christian. He felt that the Protestant Reformation could have been avoided. He wrote explicitly in his book, Mere Christianity, that a truly Christian society would be left-wing, at least economically. So he's got a whole list of stuff he associated with his Christianity that these folks would not really like. Edgier Than Thou, welcome. Ryan's always fun. Yeah, he's always fun. Let's see. So we'll start with Ryan Cannell, and then we'll move on to John of the Rice. You could stand out to hear John of the Rice because you had to listen to him for Fapcast, Morgan? Okay. So we'll start with Ryan Cannell, and we'll go from there. So let me slip into studio mode here and set this up for you guys. It'll be this screen here. And once again, this is my first time doing this sort of thing, so please bear with me as I learn the kinks as I go along. Let's see. Here we go. Ryan Cannell, Outpost. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure y'all can see this. Does everyone see that? And my web browser is DuckDuckGo, which I highly recommend to everyone, because one of the cool features of it, which you can see on screen right now, is that you can choose to play the video either in YouTube standard player or in what they call the Duck player. And the Duck player hides your viewing from YouTube's algorithm and filters out all the ads. So, you can watch all this chud content if you want to or need to for research, and YouTube will be none the wiser. But I'm going to take the hit and watch it in the normal YouTube browser. So everyone can see this screen. All right. As I mentioned at the start of the stream, I was having audio issues. So I had to set up my desktop speaker next to my microphone because my earbuds were not working. So I'm just going to start the video real quick and see if y'all can hear it. And if you can hear it, then we'll continue. So here we go. The title of this video, by the way, this is Ryan Cannell, RK Outpost. Netflix, The Chronicles of Narnia sounds like a modern day woke Hollywood disaster. And the word disaster is all caps, of course. So here we go. Does everybody hear that?
In the modern era of the entertainment industry, whenever there's a big project announced, then it's a...
All right, I'm going to pause it there. Tell me in chat if that sounded good to you, if you could hear that, if so, we'll continue. So Jay Bird in chat says, let's not force Morgan to watch John Delarose, then let's do one of the others instead. Agreed. John of the Rice is kind of... I only included him because he was one of the few chuds I found, so he's not at the top of my list either. He's a bit quiet? Okay. So everyone heard the Ryan Cannell video just fine, right? Could you turn it up a notch or two? You mean the okay, let me see. See if I can adjust the. To do audio input capture. Let's see if we can increase this a little bit here. Well, I have it turned up all the way. Maybe I'll turn up the volume on my computer. Let's see how that works.
Attached to a franchise or a popular IP that goes back decades and decades and has fans all around the world. People get.
How about that? I have my volume turned up all the way now on all my settings, so that may be something I have to address later. If it's too quiet, we'll just find something else to talk about, I guess. But if y'all can hear it enough that it's that you can make out what he's saying, then we'll go ahead. Good. He's good now? Okay. All right. I'm going to continue. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the video so we can get the full Ryan Cannell experience. Here we go.
In the modern era of the entertainment industry, whenever there's a big project announced that is attached to a franchise or a popular IP that goes back decades and decades and has fans all around the world, people get a little bit hesitant because, of course, they want to see a great adaptation of something that they love, but they don't want it to get the modern Hollywood treatment. So when Netflix announced that they had acquired the rights to the Chronicles of Narnia and were interested in doing a Chronicles of Narnia series, people rightfully were a little bit hesitant. They were wondering whether it's going to.
They're wondering if it's going to get the modern Hollywood treatment, right? This is a predictable talking point. We can predict a lot of what these guys are going to say. They're going to use words woke or DEI or whatever buzzword is stuck in their brain by their cultural Marxism derangement syndrome at the time that this comes out. So he's already setting up the dichotomy that Hollywood treatment is bad, as opposed to what? I don't know. Who else is going to adapt it?
Get the same treatment as some of these other beloved IPs that have been acquired and bastardized over recent years. And when it was announced that Greta Gerwig would be attached to this project, people were a little more worried as well. And it's not because Greta Gerwig isn't an accomplished filmmaker, but when you look at her movies that she's made, all of them are very, very focused on women. Not only women in the stories, but also women as the target audience, the target demographic.
All right, boom, there we go. Feminism infecting the Narnia, right? So this is where we could point out that there's a couple of elements of the Narnia books that are proto-woke, I guess you could say. One of them would be that there's about an even 50-50 split of main characters who are male and female. Lewis didn't play around with gender categories very much. So, he had women and men. Those were the two genders. But he split them up pretty evenly. And it's kind of hard to tell which character is actually supposed to be the main character. So a Narnia adaptation that centers, say, Susan in, let's say she's doing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, for instance. We don't know that that's the case, but let's assume she's starting there for argument's sake. Susan is one of the main characters. There's no reason you couldn't make an adaptation of Narnia with Susan as the point of view character that remains otherwise completely faithful to what Lewis wrote. So Ryan here is trying to set up a necessary contradiction between Greta Gerwig's feminism and C.S. Lewis's original vision, right? Which is obviously bullshit. But the other thing I've noticed is they like to go around and find articles that have the least flattering photos they can find of Greta Gerwig. I think this photo was from when she was pregnant. But I've noticed on some of these thumbnails that these guys have that they do pick the ones where she has a little bit more weight on her than she had earlier in her career. I don't know what she looks like now, but they do seem to be fixating on this. And I expect when they start making thumbnails about the production, after we start getting casting news and stuff like that, we're going to see thumbnails with her like screaming or crying or other crap like that. Anyway, let's continue. See what else he has to say.
And she's had a lot of success with that, but is this the right person to do Chronicles of Narnia, a beloved tale? I would say, I mean, C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, it has to be up there with one of the most revered works of fiction in the 20th century. I don't think that...
No, not really. One of the most popular, arguably, maybe. One of the most revered? No. I mean, I liked it, but I wouldn't say it was one of the most revered works of the 20th century. But, okay.
That's a stretch. And of course, people have tried before. We saw the movies that came along, well, almost 20 years ago at this point when they started doing those. And some of them were better than others. But now this had a lot of people shaking their heads, wondering, hey, is the White Witch going to really just be a sympathetic villain? And we learn about her story and why she's actually doing all of these evil, terrible things. It's not because she's actually evil.
Okay. There we go. Right. The moral relativism. That's their big fear, right? Jadis, the White Witch, in the Narnia allegory, I mean, all of Narnia is like a Christian or a biblical allegory. She's essentially Satan. And I would just point out that there's a long tradition in Christian literature of having sympathetic portrayals of Satan, right? I mean, Paradise Lost comes to mind. So it's been a while since I've read Narnia. I'm rereading it for the purposes of this project, but I think you could argue that Lewis himself had a somewhat sympathetic portrayal of her, because Lewis was a medievalist, right? A medievalist. So he incorporated a lot of medieval symbology and literary structures into the Chronicles of Narnia. And Jadis is kind of a tragic figure in that story. The way that Lucifer is kind of a tragic figure in a lot of medieval literature and storytelling. So she wasn't really intended to be evil incarnate. Lewis, like Tolkien, didn't believe such a thing existed. He believed creation was essentially good and nothing was evil in the beginning. So Jadis was fallen and corrupt and, corrupted by pride and all that, but she wasn't evil incarnate. So it's perfectly valid to tell a narrative that's somewhat sympathetic to her. I doubt Greta Gerwig would make her the main character. That would be a little weird, but she's got plenty of other female characters to work with that she could center in her narrative. And I think that would be pretty cool, personally, because the boys, at least in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, are pretty insufferable. The girls are pretty insufferable too at the beginning. All of the kids are, but the boys are a lot.
Someone else made her do it. These are the questions that roll around in people's heads when things like this get announced. But it's been a while since we got that update, and when asked about it, Amy Pascal, who is overseeing this, said some very troubling things. Greta Gerwig's Narnia film begins filming in July of 2025. It's a very new take. It's all about rock and roll.
Okay, before we hear what Ryan has to say, let's consider the source of this quote and these two different statements, right? So Amy Pascal, I've seen interviews with her. She's a little kooky. She is a movie producer, so she's obviously got some business sense. But she's one of those creative types who never really speaks clearly or concisely. She's always speaking in metaphor. and she comes off as like kind of flaky in interviews. So when she says it's all about rock and roll, I don't know what she means. That could just mean it's the energy that they're bringing. Like maybe the production design is going to be kind of like dark and gothic looking, like a metal video, depending on what story Greta Gerwig is adapting first. That would be a perfectly valid choice, you know? It could mean that the energy of the project is like really kinetic. Who the heck knows what Amy Pascal meant? The first sentence, it's a very new take. I suspect Ryan and the other guys we react to will probably make a big deal out of this and read much more into it than needs to be read into it. This could very simply mean that, unlike every other Narnia adaptation ever, Greta Gerwig is not going to start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was the first book published, but is not the first book in the chronology. So it's a very new take could just mean that she's starting with The Magician's Nephew, which is the first book chronologically, but I think, the fifth or sixth book that came in publication order. So if a Narnia adaptation is beginning with The Magician's Nephew, that's a very new take on the property that no one's ever done before. It could just be that simple. So let's see what Ryan makes out of this.
Says Amy Pascal. A very new take and all about rock and roll. I don't know exactly how that's going to translate. That's the last thing that people who read this when they were growing up, or people who are attached to these books, that's the last thing that you want to hear. That, one, it's a very new take, and somehow it's all about rock and roll. And we have the video clip here I can show you. She doesn't say too much about it. Amy Pascal's kind of a fucking weirdo in her.
All right, we can skip the video clip. I don't think we'll get much more out of that. Unless y'all want to hear him say some terrible shit about her. I don't know what he's going to say, but I don't think there's much value in playing the clip where she says the two things he just read her saying. So I'm going to just skip ahead. All right, let's go to right about here.
When you look at her three movies that she's done, you know, that she's wrote, directed, Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie, there's a very heavy theme there in the things that she makes and who it appeals to. And one of the films she's attached to, not as a director for sure, but as a writer, is still yet to be released, and that is Disney's Snow White.
Oh!
Rachel Zegler's Snow White live-action bastardization, which...
Oh, the horror. A Snow White story that centers a female perspective. What will Hollywood do next? What will they inflict on us next? Oh, I wish I was wearing pearls so I could clutch them. Let's check in with chat here. Wasn't Ryan supposed to be in a short film with Josiah Rises? Maybe he was. Yeah, he was. They made a poster and everything. But we'll leave that for another day. Okay, but making a Narnia rock opera would be rad. Yes, it would be rad. In some ways, I would prefer that over just a straight movie adaptation. That would be really interesting. So anyway, let's get back to the video where we watch Ryan Cannell freak out over the possibility that the Chronicles of Narnia will have a female-centered perspective.
It looks to be an incoming flop. We've already been told everything that they're changing about the original for the modern day. I don't know if that's the right person for...
Worth pointing out here that Disney's original version of Snow White changed the source material that it was drawn from. I'm pretty sure the original story was way darker than what Disney did.
Or Narnia. And a lot of people don't think that's the right person to adapt Chronicles of Narnia, especially if apparently you're going for this whole new take, a very new take on Narnia that's all about rock and roll somehow. I don't know how you look at C.S. Lewis's books and you get that out of it. Now, back early...
Who here wants to bet money that Ryan Cannell has never read the books? I'm not saying he's wrong necessarily, that people who read the books wouldn't immediately think of rock and roll as an aesthetic, but I'm willing to bet this dude has not read the books. He's probably read some wikis about them.
Earlier this year, Greta Gerwig was asked about this, and I actually think she had a great response. Greta
Oh,
Gerwig
interesting.
reveals she
Okay.
feels intimidated by her next project, the Chronicles of Narnia adaptation for Netflix. As a non-British person, I feel a particular sense of wanting to do it correctly. It's like when Americans do Shakespeare, if there's a slight feeling of reverence, as if maybe we should treat it with extra care, it's not our countrymen. That's great. I think that's great that she feels a great sense of reverence and that wants to do it the right way. I don't think.
Okay. So what's the problem? Like, has Bro watched any of her movies? I thought her adaptation of Little Women was the best adaptation I've ever seen. Sure, it made some changes, it took some liberties, but I think the consensus is that it was very true to the spirit of those books and brought or the book. There's not multiple books of Little Women, but it brought like a fresh perspective to the story that actually heightened people's understanding and expanded their love of the story rather than like tearing it down or whatever. And Barbie was amazing. It was the best half of Barbenheimer, if you ask me. So, you know, when I heard that Greta Gerwig was going to be directing these films, I was really excited personally because I love her work. And I think like the production design of Barbie was just amazing. And the contrast she created between Barbie Land and the real world, where they felt like two completely different worlds, worked really well. And she would need to be able to pull that off for Narnia as well. I really can't think of anyone I would rather have directing the Narnia movies.
Think that a very new take and it's all about rock and roll necessarily means doing it the right way. It seems the opposite of doing it the right way for a lot of people. Could just be yet another franchise IP beloved work of fiction that gets absolutely annihilated by modern day Hollywood.
Not annihilated
What do you guys think about
by
this?
modern day Hollywood. All right. That was a nothing burger, wasn't it? Oh my gosh. Gee whiz. All right, we're done with that. Jay Bird says, I heard Lady Bird was really good, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it either. Edgier Than Thou, who even cares anyway? What happened to creativity? The number one thing people say when recommending media to me is, I can't believe people come up with this stuff. Yeah, you know, media literacy is not a strong point for a lot of people. I think a majority of people honestly just engage with media at a very surface level. And if you just put pretty pictures in front of them and give them things that will calm their kids down for a couple of hours, they're happy with it, you know? And that's fine. It's a totally valid way to engage with media. Not everyone is like a deep media nerd like we are, where we apply literary theory and theology and philosophy and all these other filters to it. But yeah, Ryan's video was a big nothing burger. I do think it's interesting that he set up a necessary contradiction between Greta Gerwig's feminism and C.S. Lewis's original vision for the story. That'll probably be a big talking point going forward. So we've eliminated Ryan Cannell from the queue. We're not going to look at John of the Rice, aka John Dedaros, because we had multiple people in chat say no. So that leaves us with Clownfish TV, John F. Trent, or who's the other one? Oh yeah, a live stream by Geeks and Gamers. I'm surprised that Ryan Cannell did not mention Lewis's Christianity. I expected that to be a big talking point for these guys. Travis's Media Madness. I've got a question. Am I supposed to look further into media? No. You're not supposed to do anything except enjoy media the way that you prefer to enjoy it. You know? I'm an ideas man, right? when I watch a movie, especially a fantasy movie or something that's like speculative fiction, I'm way more interested in the philosophy behind it, or or looking at it through the lens of a particular literary theory, or trying to draw allegories out of it, or symbolism or anything like that. But if you're not that, that's cool. If all you do is watch movies and it's just brain candy to you, that's cool too. That's totally valid. What these guys do, like guys like Ryan Cannell and the rest of the Pakleds, is provide people with the appearance of deep media criticism while not actually saying anything. And that's what I find really annoying about these guys, because they keep saying a bunch of thought-terminating cliches over and over again, and eventually it just sinks into people like propaganda. It becomes part of their I don't want to say subconscious, but their reflexive way of thinking about things. They start finding themselves thinking about media in these terms without realizing that they're doing it, right? Because if they run this kind of content in the background while they're doing other things, it just kind of seeps into their brain. Let's see. Jaybird, I also want to do Trent. He is a Christian nationalist, right? So he'll probably bring up the Christian stuff. Maybe. Trent, as I understand it, is a Catholic, an extremely conservative Catholic. So if y'all want to look at John F. Trent, we'll check him out. All right. Third vote for Trent. All right. Let me set that up for you guys here. John F. Trent. Let's see. We are done with Ryan Cannell. Bye-bye. All right. Trent Report. The name of his channel is The Trent Report, by the way. So this is his video, and it is titled Greta Gerwig's Narnia movies described as, quote, a very new take and, quote, it's all about rock and roll. Now, the first thing I notice about the title of this video is that it is not very algorithmically enhanced. There's no, you can't see the title the way I've set it up, but there's no all caps words. There's no woke disaster. There's no DEI nightmare. There's no feminist trash or any of these algorithmic phrases. So this boring title should explain to you why John Trent is not very good at this. I've watched some of his content before and it's incredibly boring. So fair warning, this might put you to sleep. But here we go. John F. Trent, The Trent Report, and his take on Greta Gerwig's Narnia.
We got a new update on Greta Gerwig's upcoming Narnia film that will be broadcast via Netflix.
Notice how low effort this content is. Not that I'm a high effort content dude. I've made content like this before, but this is like very yellow flash, very, I have no thoughts of my own. I'm just going to read an article that you'll notice is on Fandom Pulse, the new one that they're all using instead of Bounding Into Comics, that I think Trent is involved with. I could be wrong about that, but I think he may be one of the people behind Fandom Pulse.
The producer, Amy Pascal, says that it will be a very new take and it's all about rock and roll. Pull this up over at fandompulse.com. You can find the link in the description below. I encourage you to head on over there, become a paid subscriber, and help us fight back against this woke insanity that is infecting our movies.
Do I have to say anything? Really? Okay. Woke insanity infecting the movies, right? Talking point that's been repeated ad nauseum.
Narnia looks to be infected right here.
Uh-oh.
So, in a new interview with Pete Hammond at Deadline, Pascal was asked, and how is Narnia? Has she been shooting that already? Obviously referring to director Greta Gerwig, who infamously directed the feminist propaganda that is Barbie. Pascal replied, no, we start shooting in July. Hammond then asked, that's a new take on Narnia, or? And Pascal answered, a very new take on Narnia. It's all about rock and roll. I don't know about you, but
So notice how they're milking as much content as possible from extremely vague statements, and they're going to be reading their own meaning into these statements. So over the next couple weeks or months or whatever, these two statements will probably be repeated over and over again in this kind of content with meanings attached to it that the chuds created and are not necessarily inherently a part of these two statements, but they'll create the cognitive link in their audience's mind between the statement, it's a very new take, and it's a woke feminist nightmare, or it's a very new take, which means, according to these guys, they're going to change everything, make the villain the main character, inject Marxism or something into the narrative. That's the shit they're going to be doing. These two statements on their own don't tell us very much, as we've already gone over. Once again, a very new take could just mean, and I suspect it probably does just mean, that Greta Gerwig is starting with a book that is not The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is something that no previous adaptation has ever done. They've all started with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So let's find out what Mr. Boring here has to say.
When I think of C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, I don't think about rock and roll. I also don't know what a new take on Narnia.
Okay, lions are pretty fucking metal, dude. I'm just saying. I know Aslan is supposed to be Jesus, but lions are metal.
Would be. Why would you not want to actually adapt the books? There's a reason why you got the rights to do the adaptation, right? Because you know that it is a popular property.
There's a reason but he can barely talk, and I mean I shouldn't make fun of him. Maybe he has a disability of some kind, but. And I'm not the most charismatic dude in the world either, but this guy seems to be struggling through his sentences.
Well, we know. These people like to subvert this stuff. They don't like anything that gives you a gleam of Evangelion, to quote J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, there we go.
They want to ensure that that doesn't
religious
happen.
Language.
They don't want you to have stories that point you upwards, that look to what is good and true. And C.S. Lewis was...
Okay. So yeah, there we go. Sort of... Oh, he switched articles on us. Yeah. So he's creating a necessary dichotomy, or assuming there's a necessary dichotomy between doing a mainstream Hollywood film with a feminist perspective on the one hand, and having a morally upstanding or morally uplifting effect on the audience. He thinks those two things are impossible. They cannot exist together. So that could be the foundation of a talking point going forward as well. I think that it's interesting to me, really, because John Trent here is openly religious, right? He doesn't hide his conservative religious beliefs. And he even put them in all of the Bounding into Comics articles that he would publish on that website. And yet all the other chuds use his websites, like Bounding into Comics, Fandom Pulse, That Part Place, for their own content, but they never touch directly, at least as far as I've seen, on the conservative religious aspects of what he's doing with those articles. And I'm wondering if, now that we have open Christian nationalists running the country and driving the pop culture narrative, I'm wondering if any of the bigger chuds, like the big boys, the A-listers, will start touching on that subject a little bit more openly. That'll be interesting, because a lot of their audience don't realize that these guys' talking points, all of them, the Mary Sue thing, the DEI, the woke, all of their foundational talking points of the Pakled channels originated in Christian nationalism. And the whole Chud sphere is a project of basically laundering Christian nationalist talking points to a mostly secular identified nerd demographic who they don't see themselves necessarily as conservative Christians or anything, but they're being fed Christian nationalist propaganda one or two steps removed. And I'm wondering if the Chuds are going to start being more explicit about this stuff as they go forward. Let's see what John Trent offers. Maybe he's going to give them some nuggets to work with.
It's very clear on why he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. This is from an essay that he wrote.
Oh God, are you going to read the essay? I think we can skip this.
He says this: some people seem to think that I began by asking myself how I could say.
All right, that's right. Geez, I don't want to go through this whole article. He's going to do it, isn't he? Let's skip ahead. All right, he's back to the original article, his original article now. So he just read some essay by C.S. Lewis talking about how Lewis came up with the idea of Narnia and what he was trying to do religiously. We can back up and look at that. I'll read part of it. I'll just scan it. Okay, so yeah, Lewis is just saying everything began with images and then came the form. He's talking about his writing process and the role that his faith played in that. So I don't want to listen to John Trent read this whole article. Let's see what he says here. He's at
Get with Greta Gerwig's, and it seems that is not what we are going to get with Greta Gerwig's adaptation that is being produced by Amy Pascal. She's describing it as a very new take, and it's all about rock and roll. None of those.
I mean, in addition to lions being metal as fuck, Christian rock is a thing, right? So what's wrong with being rock and roll for a Christian story like Narnia?
Sound
bro?
like what C.S. Lewis wrote in his The Chronicles of Narnia series. Nevertheless, we did get a update about 2 weeks ago that it was.
All right, he's just going to keep reading this article. I'm done with this. This is boring as fuck. Bad content. Boring content. We're done with John F. Trent. But I think one of the things John Trent did in that video there, overall, the takeaway of that video for me is that he established in his rhetoric a necessary contradiction between Greta Gerwig's feminism and C.S. Lewis's Christianity. It's interesting that they think there's a necessary contradiction there when there is not. This is not religious studies on the Old Ways channel, so I won't go too deeply into it, but I think any reasonably smart person would know that Christianity is a very diverse set of ideas that goes back thousands of years, and there are plenty of self-identified Christian people in the world who would also call themselves feminists and can cite scripture to back it up and so forth. So John F. Trent is turning Christian identity into a culture war grift talking point, right? And trying to say that you can't be a Christian and be a feminist, for instance. GM Morgan said up in the chat a little bit earlier, lions and witches are fucking metal as hell. That is correct. Based and correct pilled take there. Jaybird says, disappointing. I really wanted him to say that rock and roll is sinful or satanic. Maybe he does believe that. I'm not sure. But, Christian rock is a thing. And some of it's actually good. I've heard some Christian rock in my day that did not offend my ears. Travis's Media Madness says, Christian nationalism is not a good thing. Thinking Trump is Jesus Christ is not at all how you try to reach secular people about Christianity. It's the same thing as the Bible thumpers. Yeah. I could make a very compelling argument that Christian nationalism is idolatry, and others have made it better than me, so just go look them up. But yeah, it's ridiculous to me that nationalism is idolatry, I would argue. You know, it's worshiping a country or a political leader, not your God or your Savior, right? So anyway, we've eliminated John F. Trent. We've eliminated Ryan Cannell. We're not going to look at John of the Rice. So that leaves us with Clownfish TV or a Geeks and Gamers live stream. Or what? I have one other one. Let me check what the other one was. Let's see. Clownfish TV, Geeks and Gamers, John of the Rice. All right, that's it. So we're left with Clownfish TV, a Geeks and Gamers live stream. Which of those y'all want to check out? Let's do Geeks and Gamers to see the worst possible take. I disagree. I think there can be far worse takes than we've just seen so far. But Clownfish TV doesn't really say anything at all, so probably not them. Yeah, none of these guys say anything at all. You're talking a lot, but you're not saying anything. Is that what the Talking Heads song says? All right. We'll do the Geeks and Gamers live stream. It's long, so we'll have to scan ahead of it. We'll have to scan through it to find what we're going to be talking about here. Let me set this up. There we go. Alrighty. Now, this is a live stream that Geeks and Gamers ran about a month ago, and it is titled Netflix set to destroy, in all caps, the Chronicles of Narnia, comma, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is dead. So, I guess they only talked about Chronicles of Narnia and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. So, here we go. I'm going to start this video, and then we'll have to scan through it to find where they talk about Narnia. Let's see.
They're invested in Disney Star Wars.
Wait. It's Ryan Cannell again. So this is a D-list Geeks and Gamers stream. They didn't even put their big star in this. Oh, wow. Okay. So once again, Ryan Cannell and this guy, Trevor Beardo. I don't know who that is.
So maybe that's where he's at. Maybe he'll be back tomorrow. I don't really know. Actually.
Okay. Let's scan ahead here. Oh, I just saw some Narnia footage. No, that's not Narnia. Super chats. They're going through super chats. Here we go. There we go. All right. We'll start right about here.
Did know some things about the movie, including who is going to direct.
Let's back up a little bit more.
About the humans. That's true. And, you know, when it comes to a new adaptation we're about to see for Chronicles of Narnia, the villains may be the people that are making this movie. It was several years ago when we heard the report that Netflix had acquired the rights to the Chronicles of Narnia. Mm-hmm. And since then, of course, you've heard the jokes about, hey, they're going to give it the Netflix treatment, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Well, it's been a while since that first got announced. And we did know some things about the movie, including who is going to direct it, at least for the first handful of movies.
It'll be interesting to see which Ryan Cannell take is more extreme, the one on his home channel or the one on Geeks and Gamers. I wonder if he'll be substantively different between the two.
And that, of course, had people a little bit concerned. Greta Gerwig attached to direct Narnia movie. Netflix acquired film and TV rights to the C.S. Lewis book series in 2018. Now, Greta Gerwig obviously coming off the massive success of the Barbie movie. And when you look at her, she's an accomplished filmmaker who's done well at the box office also. So, but when you look at what she's made, from Lady Bird to Little Women to Barbie, all of them have very specific messaging, and all of them are geared primarily towards a female audience. And certainly she's been very successful doing that. But the idea that that might be the road that they take with something like Chronicles of Narnia has people very fucking worried. This is one of the most beloved.
Okay, again, there's pretty good gender equity if we just consider the gender binary, which is what C.S. Lewis believed in at the time. There's very good gender equity in the stories, equal representation to men and women, multiple points of view characters. So an adaptation centering a female character is a perfectly valid take on the story. So far, Ryan has not said anything thrilling or different. I'm interested in this Beardo guy. I wonder what he thinks.
Of works of
How
fiction
crazy is
from the
Beardo?
20th century, C.S. Lewis's books. And this quote,
Again, I would dispute that the Chronicles of Narnia is one of the most beloved stories of the 20th century. It is, again, very popular and therefore beloved, but I think even people who like Narnia a lot would rank a whole lot of stories above this one. This was written for children, which is why it's beloved, right? This was like, for a certain generation, this was Harry Potter. So a lot of people grew up loving this, but I think that most adults would not rank Narnia as one of the most beloved stories of the 20th century. This is just like Ryan using bombastic language to set up a narrative. It's a great work, it's a great work by a great man of the 20th century, and Hollywood is going to tear it down because they hate Western civilization. That's what he's going for here.
here has people even more worried. Greta Gerwig's Narnia film begins filming in July of 2025. It's a very new take. It's all about rock and roll, says Amy Pascal.
Right, come on, let's get on with it.
They only said two things about it, and both those things are fucking concerning. One, the fact that it's a very new take, and two, that it's all about rock and roll.
Okay, Ryan, a new take can just mean, as I've said before, that she's not starting with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. She might be starting with The Magician's Nephew, which would be the first book in the chronology. And if she's doing that, then that's a new take, but still a faithful adaptation. Another thing I could see her doing that I think would be interesting is starting with the story The Horse and His Boy, which takes place during a period of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that Lewis doesn't flesh out very much, because the kids grow up and become adults in Narnia before they return to the real world or to Earth, where they revert to being children again. And The Horse and His Boy is the story of another character from Earth who visits Narnia while the Pevensey children are reigning as adult monarchs. So an adaptation of that story would be super interesting too, and would be a very new take on the property. So this is just the Chud tactic of catastrophizing completely normal language and vague statements that are made for marketing purposes because they don't really have anything to build a narrative on yet. So they got to work with crumbs here. But they're already framing it into the culture war battle of conservatives, a beloved conservative tale that's a great pillar of Western civilization that woke Hollywood is going to tear down.
The first movie that they're going to make supposedly is Magician's Nephew, which is the sixth book to come out, but the first chronologically.
Okay. Where is he getting that?
Takes place in 1900. Get it?
Rock and roll.
All about rock and roll. What the fuck are we doing? Everybody.
Maybe it's hey guys, maybe it's a steampunk take. Maybe Earth in her movie is going to be steampunk, which is kind of rock and roll and kind of metal, and then transfer it to like medieval Narnia or something. Who the hell knows? We don't know. Again, Amy Pascal's kind of a flighty, goofy person. She says things that it's hard to suss out what she means by them. The statement is a nothing burger, and you guys are catastrophizing it as usual.
That's a fan is already fucking worried about this shit. It's a story that's full of, Christian allegories and themes and things like this. Mm-hmm. And the idea of turning it into a piece of modern day bullshit has a lot of people rightly worried.
All right, there we go. There we go. Ryan introduced the Christianity versus modernity talking point. I wonder how much traction that'll get going forward. Like I said on the stream last night with Dane and Morgan, that I think one of the things we're going to see going forward over the next few months is that a lot of the Chud channels are going to start letting their masks slip a lot. I think, this is just speculation on my part, but I think that a lot of the big names like Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic, Disparu, Shadiversity is definitely openly religious, but I think that a lot of the Chud channels are secretly Christian nationalists and have been all along, and they've just been hiding their power level. And I'm wondering, I think they're either Christian nationalists as believers, or they are well aware that they are laundering Christian nationalist talking points, and they don't care. And I'm wondering if over the next few months, because of Trump's ascendancy and the rise of Christian nationalism in our government, whether these guys are going to start being more open about that. So this, with Ryan doing it, could be a hint of things to come. Maybe he's testing out some early talking points for the big dogs. But it looks like Beardo was about to say something. I want to hear from Beardo. I'm tired of Ryan. Give me more Beardo.
Yeah, justifiably so. When you take, like you said, when you take such a beloved franchise like the Chronicles of Narnia and all these books, and with all the Christian theming and stuff, and then you're going to get some of these feminist woke people in the industry, and you're going to give them the helm, and they're in charge of producing and writing this thing.
Right. There you go. Christian versus woke. The cognitive link there is trying to create a necessary connection between being a Christian and being a conservative. There is no such necessary connection. Just look up Martin Luther King Jr., look up liberation theology. There's tons of other examples. Christianity versus woke. Christian values versus woke Hollywood, modern day Hollywood. It's interesting that they did this twice. Maybe, I don't know much about Beardo, but maybe he is a Christian. I don't know. But I always find this dichotomy funny, because one of the things they complain about with woke Hollywood is that I've seen a couple of the Chuds complain something to this effect, that woke Hollywood is always trying to uplift the oppressed and place the downtrodden in positions of power that they did not earn. And they will sometimes contrast this with Christian masculine values or something. Like, I pick on Disparu a lot because he uses that phrase a lot. And oddly, he did not make a Chronicles of Narnia video yet. But I have to wonder, have they read the Gospels? Have they read Luke? Like the Magnificat, the Song of Mary in Luke chapter 1, where it is prophesied that Jesus is going to pull the powerful from the throne and uplift the downtrodden and put them in charge. Have they read James 5? Have they read the Jubilee laws from the Old Testament? Like, I'm not even a biblical scholar. I just was raised Catholic, and I know all this stuff. Whatever, dude. I could go off on a rant here. Not the point. The thing to keep in mind is they're setting up a necessary dichotomy in their rhetoric between, as they usually do, between conservative, traditional values and woke Hollywood. And now they're starting to openly use the word Christian. So this could be a trend going forward.
You have absolutely every reason to be concerned and worried, especially when you have these comments. It's going to be a brand new take, and it's going to be rock and roll. What is it, like a musical rock and roll? Like what are you saying, that there's going to be a lot of action? Like it's very vague of what they mean by.
Exactly, it's very vague. And by the way, both of those would be awesome, awesome options. A musical Narnia. Has there been a Narnia musical like on stage? There has to have been. I'll look that up later. That would be interesting to watch. But yeah, a musical would be dope. And there's, of course, a lot of action in Narnia, so that would be cool. I'd be interested to see how Greta Gerwig handles action scenes, actually.
By rock and roll.
And I think, like, Magician's Nephew, I think is going to be tough to adapt as the first thing they're doing out there anyway. But that's a story that takes place before everything else. Set in 1900. And then everything else basically takes place kind of in the 1940s. But I feel like this...
Yeah, you know what The Magician's Nephew is? It's the origin story of Narnia and the White Witch. Ryan was complaining earlier that he didn't want to see a Narnia production that centered the White Witch and gave us her backstory, but that's what The Magician's Nephew kind of does. And that was written by C.S. Lewis himself. So I'm going to like prioritize rereading all the books. I've read them multiple times when I was younger, and I remember a lot of details, but I'm sure I'm getting the timelines mixed up. But yeah, that's the one where we see the creation of Narnia and the backstory of Jadis. So perfectly valid to do a story about that because Lewis did it.
Setting is very important to the story and where it's at. The idea that they might do an actual, like, 2020s version of this fucking thing is the most horrifying thing I could imagine, to be honest with you. Now, it's just one quote. You know, before Greta Gerwig, when she was asked about this, she said, listen, I feel like there's a lot of pressure doing this, and I feel like I need to be very respectful. It's kind of like when Americans do Shakespeare. You feel like there's extra pressure to make sure you're doing it right because it's not your playground. And then the first thing to come out is this, that it's going to be all about rock and roll. And it's a very new take.
That's very new take.
Right. Those were two different people saying that. Yeah, we're done here. So it's interesting. Let's brainstorm how Greta Gerwig could update the Earth setting for Narnia and still have it be thematically valid, right? The thing that, in other words, what I mean is let's assume she's creating an adaptation where the children come from 2020's Earth and not early 1900s Earth. And could we still explore Lewis's themes in that way? What Lewis was doing by setting up that dichotomy is talking about the difference between the enchanted worldview and, for lack of a better word, the secular worldview or the modernist worldview. And he said it during World War II because that was a very traumatic time for England. It was an existential crisis for England, really. And they, you know, during the time period in which the Pevensey children first visit Narnia, Britain wasn't sure if they were going to survive or not. The country was going to survive or not. And you could look around the modern world in the 2020s and find any number of existential crises facing us that could be used to tap the same well of themes, right? Yeah, GM Morgan says they could be Palestinian kids fleeing the war overseas, or they could be Ukrainian. Yeah. She could set the story in the early 2000s and make the kids New Yorkers just around the time of 9/11. She could, in the scene set on Earth, she could lean into climate change, right? Which is something a lot of young people are worried about, rightfully so. We should all be worried about it. That's an existential threat to civilization, far greater than bombing London was to Britain, I would argue. So there's many ways that Greta Gerwig could update the setting that the children are coming from before they enter Narnia and still stay true to Lewis's themes and Lewis's contrast between modernity and the medieval, between the secular worldview and the enchanted worldview. I don't think she's going to do that because she's very good with period pieces. She's made Little Women, which was excellent in every way. She clearly is able to do really good period pieces that deal with coming of age stories and deal with children's stories in a mature way, which is what Lewis or what an adaptation of Narnia would require, I think. For me, the big weakness of the Disney version that we got about 20 years ago is that it was made for kids, which is a fine choice. But I think Disney forgot that a lot of adults bringing their kids to see this movie were themselves Narnia fans when they were kids. And there's a little too much immaturity for my taste in what Disney did with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think Greta Gerwig could give us a story about children that is nonetheless very relatable to adults and what adults are worried about these days. So I, for one, am looking forward to it. There's very few directors that come to my mind when I thought about who would adapt this. And when I heard that Greta Gerwig was doing it, I was like, oh, awesome. She's a great choice. So I'm going to check out some more chat here. Let's see. Jaybird. Imagine adapting a British story like Sherlock Holmes and changing it. That would be wild. Who dares? Who would dare do such a thing? Who among us would dare to create, for example, a 7-season television show about Sherlock Holmes set in New York City with Watson as a Asian American woman? That sounds like woke Hollywood nonsense to me. Philip Ballesteros, sorry about your name. I doubt that they ever saw Hamilton. I don't understand the reference there. Maybe, I don't know. Okay. When was the Rwandan genocide? There's plenty of horrors in the world. That was in the 90s, Jaybird. Yeah, there's any number of ways to adapt that part of the story. And just imagine if she did that, though. Imagine if she chose the Rwandan genocide and had the Pevensey children be Black Africans going to Narnia, which would be thematically on point and right up Lewis's alley. But man, these guys would blow their tops. Right? This starts shooting in July, which means between now and July, we're going to start seeing like casting news and all sorts of other like BTS stuff. We might like see more interviews with Greta Gerwig. We might see set designers or costume designers talking about their work. When actors get cast, we'll hear their thoughts on the script and so forth. And all it's going to take is one Black person in the cast or one queer-coded person, not even in the cast, just a queer-coded person working on some aspect of the production or including the color pink or a rainbow or something in pre-production material. And that'll be it. That'll be the trigger that they can start building their culture war narrative around. So yeah, I've been at this about 90 minutes. I think that's a pretty good run for my first time streaming ever. The takeaway for me here is that it looks like they're starting to test out openly using the word Christian. I do not know how prominent that will be going forward. It will not surprise me if they start doing that, but they don't have to. Their grift works perfectly well either way. But I have suspected for a while that these guys are going to start taking their mask off and using openly conservative religious language that they've never done before. Jay Bird, remember the gay Gandalf controversy when the Peter Jackson films were made? Yes, I do. And I also remember that Christopher Tolkien hated those movies because he felt they betrayed his father's religious and philosophical themes. And the Tolkien estate is deeply involved in the Rings of Power, which, for all of its changes to lore, hews far closer to Tolkien's religious and philosophical themes than Peter Jackson's movies ever did. So it's kind of ironic to see that kind of stuff going on. Yeah, Morgan, it wasn't the gay Gandalf thing wasn't a huge controversy at the time that I remember, but I've read interviews where Ian McKellen says that at the time he got like hate mail, or the production got hate mail about him being cast because he was openly gay. Although I don't think he made that public at the time. It's just something he talked about afterwards. But he still got harassment for it, right? Whether he went public with the harassment or not. It wasn't talked about in the media necessarily, but it happened. And this has just been going on forever. Philip, I'm referring that Hamilton does rap while Narnia would do rock and roll. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I'm not a big fan of the Hamilton musical, honestly. But a Narnia musical, in principle, would be awesome. And there were some pretty good musical numbers in Barbie, so it would not surprise me that if Greta Gerwig put any in this movie. So just so you guys know the details, Greta Gerwig is contracted to do at least 2 Narnia movies for Netflix. And she insisted, and Netflix broke and to her will and conceded. She insisted that her movies be given at least a limited theatrical release so that they can qualify for the Oscars and stuff like that. And Netflix agreed to that. So the first movie starts shooting in July, which means they probably already have a script locked down, and they're probably in the casting process right now. The first movie is scheduled to release around Thanksgiving of 2026 in IMAX theaters, I think about 1,000 screens, for about 3 to 4 weeks, after which it will leave theaters and shift over to the Netflix platform, where it will be exclusively available after that. So that gives us almost 2 whole years to monitor the Chud talking points about this and see if it becomes as big of a culture war battle as I think it's probably going to be, because it is so thematically and culturally similar to The Lord of the Rings in the conservative mind, that the fact that a openly feminist Hollywood director is adapting it has already got their hackles up. So I think they're going to try to generate a lot of rage bait content out of it that may lean specifically into the Christian stuff, because unlike Lord of the Rings, which had a lot of Christian themes in it, the Christian themes in Narnia are far more explicit, because Lewis was writing for a less sophisticated reading audience. He was writing for children, and Lord of the Rings was written for adults. The Hobbit was written for kids, but Lord of the Rings was a more sophisticated story written for a more sophisticated audience. So Tolkien was more subtle with his Christian themes and so forth, but Lewis was not. So it's going to be kind of hard for the Chuds to build a narrative about woke Hollywood disrespecting the lore and tearing down Lewis's vision without talking about the Christian stuff, because that's kind of the point, really, of what Lewis was up to. So anyway, I think I am going to call it quits now. I thank you for joining me. Let me know in the comments afterwards how this was for you. If you want to see more live streams from me, that would be awesome. If you don't, if you think this was a disaster, let me know that too. Be sure to like and subscribe, all the usual algorithmic things. And look for me. I appear pretty regularly on live streams with Dane of Actual Fandom and GM Morgan. We are working on a project called Movie Danger, which is going to be, it's still nebulous, really, the format, but the basic idea is we're going to be like reacting to movies and other properties that are prominent in the culture war narrative, and like going back and taking a look at them and seeing, are they bad or are they good, right? But we're not going to be doing it in a format like this. We're going to be like watching the movie, reacting to it, that sort of stuff. So we will be doing a trial run of that on Dane's Patreon for, I think we're gonna watch the first episode of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man as a trial run, because that's not like 2 hours long. It's just like a little cartoon. So we're going to see if we can make that work logistically. Anyway, be on the lookout for that. And thanks for joining me. I'm going to end the stream now. I'll see y'all around. Remember that what's best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and engage in discourse with the women.